Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. And I hope you enjoyed your lunch, particularly given the film we've just seen. And if you didn't eat it all, I hope you're now feeling sufficiently guilty. That film was one of the Save Our Wild Isles business films, which was created by a collaboration between Silverback Films and the conservation organisations, the World Wildlife Fund, RSPB and the National Trust, all, of course, inspired by those great films, Wild Isles, narrated by Sir David Attenborough. And that clip was from Hungry for Change, which is a film which shows the impact the food system has on UK nature, and it does act as a warning to other countries if they follow our lead. It's available in full on YouTube. I'd recommend you watch it. The film actually serves as a very nice introduction to our environment session this afternoon, which is delivered in partnership with Thrings, and we do thank them for their support. And the first session is entitled From Waste to Opportunity, and we've got three speakers who will give us their very individual and very unique take on that subject. Before I introduce them, I'd like to remind you that Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, will be arriving as we finish this session around 2:40. And we'll finish promptly, and then I will ask you to be upstanding as she enters. Okay, so we'll be ready for that fairly prompt at 2:40. So to our speakers, I'll introduce them all at once, and we're delighted to welcome first Jim Shanks, who's a Scottish dairy farmer who has sustainably diversified to become the only commercial tomato grower in Scotland. Then we have Vincent Dumizel. He is a senior advisor for Ocean at the United Nations Global Compact and author of The Seaweed Revolution. And then we have Emma Brown, who is the commercial manager in the fresh produce team at Fair Share, who redistribute 54,000 tonnes of food each year. We'll hear all the presentations one after the other, then take the questions either via the app or live from the floor. So please welcome our first speaker, Jim Shanks.
Hello, my name's Jim Shanks. I'd like to thank the Oxford Farming Conference for inviting me along here today. I am the fifth generation of Jim Shanks, and I'm the fifth generation of dairy farmer. So you could say that I have dairy farming in my blood. But in 2009, I underwent an Nuffield scholarship looking at renewable energy in agriculture, and I travelled Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and the States, and I looked at all sorts of renewables, and I came home with all the ideas and enthusiasm and knowledge that you could wish for. And I took three projects into planning. I took a large wind project into planning, I took a single wind turbine project into planning, and I took a biogas project into planning. Now that was around about 2011, and that was just when renewables was just really starting to take off. But also at that time, planners were becoming increasingly cautious over what they consented, and I found myself in quite a battle with planners to get the project through. The other problem I had, as you could imagine, when you come back and put three projects like that into planning for want of a better phrase, I developed quite a fan club locally, and it was a very difficult time. I was fighting the planners, and every Telegraph poll had a poster against my projects on it, and you know, things like you'd go into the local shop and they'd have a shelf dedicated to pro forma objection forms ready for distribution. So it was a really difficult time for myself and family and the business, and effectively after about 2 years, I ended up with nothing. I had two wind projects that I had achieved electrical grid connection for, but I failed to achieve planning consent for, and I had a biogas project that I had planning for, but without electrical grid connection. And it's so I had nothing. They say that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan, and I was very much an orphan that year. And needless to say that that year when I had nothing, my invite to speak at the Oxford Farming Conference was somewhat lost in the post. But a few months later, I got a phone call from Scottish Power, and they said, "Jim, we'd like to speak to you directly. Because for one, we are tired of your consultants hitting us over the head with a hammer. And secondly, we think what we're telling your consultants isn't what they're telling you. So I went up and met Scottish Power directly, and they showed me the difficulties they had with my biogas project. But they said, look, we have a small pot of money coming down the road from the EU, and it's to help little guys like yourself get connected to the grid. So at last, I had a chink of hope, and we kept in touch with Scottish Power, and the project finally actually could move forward. Other things started happening then. Doors started opening for me. Marks & Spencer phoned up out the blue and said, we hear you're looking at building a glasshouse in Scotland. They said we would take everything that you could produce. I had SEPA starting to be helpful with me, but yes, sorry, I'm just. But sorry, at the same time that I was moving the biogas project forward, I looked outside, and about 2012, on a rain-sodden landscape as it was in 2012, and I jokingly thought to myself, would it not be great to put a roof over the farm and turn the water on and off for once? And I remembered what I'd seen back in my scholarship, that in Scandinavia and America, there was every time I saw a biogas plant, there was a large glass house next to it, and I could understand what they were doing. They were producing the electricity from the biogas, but they were using the waste streams to put to good use. So they were putting the heat and the carbon dioxide into the glass house to be productive. And I thought, I could do that. So I thought, well, how do you find out about glass houses? So I just did another Nuffield scholarship, just without the application process. I picked up the phone, travelled to France, Netherlands, mainly south of England. I asked everybody how to do it, and they told me. And that's where I was getting to. Doors started opening for me. The Marks & Spencer said, we'll take everything. And the SEPA started being helpful, which I wasn't used to. The other thing that I wasn't used to was I sat down with a planner, and I said, well, this is what I'm thinking about. And the planner says, well, what size are you looking at? And I said, well, about 4 acres, about 7 meters tall. Now, I've never heard the response I got from the planning officer before that, and I've never heard the response since, but he sat back in his chair, and he said, do you know something? You could build it bigger if you wanted. So there was problems along the way, though. There was always problems. But by that time, I'd started to understand how you get around problems with my experience before. That the biogas plant wasn't going to be big enough to supply all the heat for the glass house that I was looking at. So I thought, well, we've got a lot of local forestry. We've got a lot of waste wood chip coming off local sawmills. So we could top up the heat with biomass boilers. So that worked. We had family. The other problem I had was family reluctance, because biogas was easy to sell to the family. That you said, yeah, you put the slurry in here and the electricity comes out here, and mum and dad said, yeah, that's brilliant. That's what farmers do. You tell them about a glass house. Well, farmers don't do glass houses. That was a different kettle of fish altogether. But what I did was I got them to go and see what I'd seen with glass houses, and allowed them to get the bug that I had got for glasshouse production. I got a huge amount of natural enthusiasm built up for the glasshouse project, and I could see them building up that enthusiasm. The more glasshouses they looked round. At present, reading Bill Shankly's autobiography, and he talks about natural enthusiasm, and he said natural enthusiasm, he said, with it, you can do anything. Without it, you're nothing. And I thought, never a truer word. Because I found that back then, that when you had natural enthusiasm for something, you could go and climb mountains. Now, in 2014, we built a biogas plant on time, on budget, and by that time, I was putting my final business plan to my family, to my bank manager, and at that time, they were looking back at me saying, well, what are you waiting for? Get her built. And we turned the least productive 4 acres on the farm into the most productive 4 acres of food production in Scotland. And in one fell sweep, when we built the glass house, we became the Scottish tomato industry in a oneer. So just to go through what we actually do. So we still milk cows. We still produce slurry from the dairy cows and produce milk. We use the slurry to go into biogas. It's a German model I copied, that you put the dairy slurry in, you mix it with a little bit of crop, and you produce electricity, carbon dioxide, and heat. It's the German model: localized production, localized employment, localized profits going back in. The electricity runs the whole farm and car and everything else. The carbon dioxide and heat is diverted to the glass house. The digestate that comes out of the biogas negates the need for bought-in inorganic fertilizer. I do say negates the need because I still buy the odd bag or two, but I don't shout too loudly about it. We top up the heat with biomass from local forests and waste wood chip from local sawmills. So we still produce the milk, but now we produce 1,600 megawatts of renewable electricity. We produce 9,500 megawatts of renewable heat. We produce 750 tons of tomatoes. We even have 40 busloads of Americans come round as we've developed into a little bit of a tourist attraction in the area. We became Tesco's best farm for carbon footprint in 2 years running out of all their milk producers. Staff level went from 4 to 40 in 1 year. Our EBITDA went from 100,000 up to 750,000. Debt peaked at 3.8 and is down below $500,000 there just now. We had such thrills as on cue Princess Anne coming and opening the glass house. She was an absolute star. And we had actually Prince Philip a year later come round the glass house. And amongst all this craziness, probably one of my best achievements was that I did get married. We've got 3 kids now and a dog. I got to name the dog, she got to name the kids. And but lastly, very symbolically, and it's just a little thing, but it's very symbolic to myself, that shop shelf that used to store pro forma objection forms now sells our tomatoes. So I'm very proud about that. Thank you very much.